Next lecture will be OZNA Repression and Persecution in Herzegovina in 1945. The speaker will be Dr. Hrvoje Mandić, a historian and archivist who is coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina originally, where he finished his high school studies, but doctored here at the University of Zagreb. He is the head of the Central Digitalization Office of the University of Zagreb, an external professor at the Faculty of Philosophy of the University of Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He published 2 books. In April 2024, he published a book, The Franciscan Province of Herzegovina in the Second World War and its Aftermath. And just this January, he published the book War After War from 1945 to 1951, Criminal Prosecutions of Supporters of the Anti-Communist Guerrilla in Herzegovina. Hrvoje, you are welcome.
Thank you, dear Mate. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hrvoje Mandić, and I'm honored to be here today. And I would like to thank you, the organizers, for this opportunity. And also look forward to sharing my work with you, OZNA's Repression and Persecution in Herzegovina, 1945. At the command of the Josip Broz Tito, Supreme Commander of the National Liberation Army and Partisan Detachments of Yugoslavia, on May 13, 1944, the Department for the Protection of the Nation, OZNA, was established at the Commission for the People's Defense of the National Committee of Liberation of Yugoslavia. The influence of the People Commissariat for International Affairs, NKVD, on the organization of OZNA. Since the autumn of 1944, a significant Soviet influence among the partisan movement has been noticeable, and this movement adopted Soviet methods as the core of its operation. OZNA thus became a centralized security intelligence organization with a single structure and uniform working methods throughout the territory that was later to become Yugoslavia. OZNA was organized in 4 divisions. The first was in charge of operation abroad and on the occupied territory. The second operated on the liberated territory. The third had counterintelligence tasks in the National Liberation Army and partisan detachments of Yugoslavia. And the fourth dealt with statistical and technical issues. On August 15, 1944, shortly after OZNA has been established, the National Committee of Liberation of Yugoslavia established the Corps of National Defense of Yugoslavia, KNOI, as quasi-military police. KNOI was subordinated to the Commissioner for the People's Defense, who exercised command through the OZNA chief. In May 1945, at the end of the war, KNOI had 7 divisions and 3 autonomous brigades. This is Uglješa Danilović, chief of OZNA in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Hrvoje Osmokovich was in charge of operation on occupied territory. On the other hand, Slobodan Šakota was in charge for operations in liberated territory. The interesting thing is that those are all identifications of Hrvoje Osmokovich, the identification of member of the Armed Force of the Independent State of Croatia, also the Home Guard Arsenal Technical Institute legitimation, the Croatian State Railways, and finally the identification of OZNA member on which Hrvoje Osmokovich's authentic identity is confirmed. Why is so interesting in Osmokovich? Osmokovich's task was to preserve infrastructural objects in Mostar at the beginning of 1945, so that units of 29th Herzegovian Division could advance through the Neretva Valley towards Jablanica, Konjic and Sarajevo. Osmokovich was tasked with moving to Sarajevo as urgently as possible at the end of March 1945, because Aleksandar Ranković and Uglješa Danilović were dissatisfied with the situation in partisan movement in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, under Vladimir Perić-Volter's leadership. Osmokovich carried out his assigned task within the partisan movement in Sarajevo, but on April 6, 1945, Osmokovich was wounded by shell, while Perić, he was in the same place as Osmokovich, was killed in Sarajevo that same day. When the first phase of intelligence operation of OZNA on the occupied territory ended, Osmokovich was no longer needed by the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, and he was sent after 3 years after to Goli Otok in 1948. In the first phase of OZNA operation in Herzegovina, from October 1944 to March 1945, when the Mostar operation, personally led by Josip Broz Tito, officially ended, crimes were committed by OZNA against the Croatian civil population and Catholic priests and nuns in Herzegovina. The second phase of establishing authority on the liberated territory in Herzegovina then followed, led by Slobodan Šakota, whose headquarters was in Trebinje. Slobodan Šakota was Serb and a former student which birthplace in Chapina. From May to August 1945, Mostar was one of the stations of Križni Put, with further stations extending to the eastern Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia and Macedonia. The partisans organized a number of camps, prisons, as well as military courts to deal with the political opponents in Mostar. One such camp was the Western Barracks in Mostar. OZNA and KNOI used this location, specifically the Bishop's Headland, a site next to the barracks after February 15th, 1945, as a site for execution of prisoners, Ustasha, Domobrans, Home Guards, brought from Križni Put into the Western Barracks. This involved the detention of Croatian war prisoners from the Križni Put in the prison Nova Čelovina in the center of Mostar. Some of the prisoners were killed and thrown into the pit, which was later used to build partisan cemetery. This is the newest research I did. Actually, you see the partisan monument cemetery in Mostar, or memorial, Benet, which the remains of mostly fallen German soldiers and members of independent state of Croatia armed forces are buried. So I checked the almost 14th bodies of a German soldier are still in beneath this monument. The next interesting thing is the partisan monument Ruža was built above a mass grave containing the remains of 95 bodies, soldiers of armed forces of independent state Croatia, the German army, and several partisans who were thrown into the grave. The mass grave was removed in 2013 from Široki Brijeg, and all of 95 bodies were transferred to the cemetery Pis Bila, Groblje Mira, location between Široki Brijeg and Mostar. In Mostar, there are several mass graves. Pit near Bijelo Polje, into which 153 prisoners from Čelovina prison were thrown on July 9, 1945. According to Krunoslav Draganović, approximately 7,000 soldiers who were brought in columns from Mostar were killed and thrown into the Varduša pit, located somewhere towards Ljubinje and Stolac. These mass murders were carried out under the command of OZNA, Captain Dejan Chapina, Serb from Domanovići, village near Chapina. According to Ilya Sharavanya's testimony in December 1945, the partisans killed Dejan Chapina at the wedding in the village of Kruševo near Mostar. OZNA retaliated by arresting 19 civilians from Kruševo and surrounding villages for Christmas. On December 27, 1945, OZNA killed them at the same place where the captain Dejan Chapina was murdered. In Chapina, on the church meadow next to the large church, there's a mass grave containing the remains of about 200 men, women, children, and elderly. Additionally, there is another mass grave for the direction of Chapina towards Mogorjevo, near the village of Brist in Chapina. Most of the Croatian prisoners were transported by trains and trucks to the Trebinje, Bileća, Nikšić pits and other execution sites. One group of prisoners of the independent state of Croatia armed force was transported by partisans towards the Nevesinje. Those who did not reach the destination were killed and thrown into the Novakuša pit in Bišina, near Nevesinje, which the post-war authorities of Nevesinje and Mostar turned into a garbage disposal site to cover up the war crime. According to partisan testimonies, Croatian prisoners of Home Guard killed in Podvelezhje and thrown into the pits. According to available historiographical sources, 600 prisoners were loaded onto a transport from the prison Čelovina in Mostar. From one of the columns which arrived in Mostar from Sarajevo with 740 prisoners, only 60, born in 1945, were singled out in Mostar, while the rest were taken further. When the Osijek column with 370 prisoners arrived in Mostar, only 7 young men underage were selected, and the rest were also sent towards Trebinje. Witness Ivan Raubić, at the end of 1945, stated that near Trebišnica he saw 200 to 300 Home Guard prisoners extracting parts of a destroyed bridge from the water and loading various goods into wagons heading towards Montenegro. Raubić believed that after finishing their work, they will be released home, but they did not return. They were killed. Witness Raubić claimed that the Home Guard prisoners were killed in the German trenches at Bradina, near Konjic, after finishing their work for partisans. Additionally, Raubić recounted that the Home Guard soldiers who were cutting down forests in Podvelezhje, Mostar, were also killed and thrown into the pits of Veleš, Mountain Veleš. One of the largest mass graves of those killed at Bleiburg and along the Križni put is located in Herzegovina. I must return back. Sorry. This is Stolac. This is Radimlja near Stolac. The Radimlja site, this one, consists of 4 or 5 pits where the partisans carried out mass executions after Bleiburg and Križni put. Estimates suggest that at the site 1,864 soldiers and civilians from eastern Herzegovina, as well as from other places, were killed in the post-war period. Regarding Croatian civilians and the soldiers of the independent state of Croatia armed forces in Mostar, it is currently impossible to determine the precise number of those killed in February and immediately after the war in 1945. One group of prisoners from the independent states of Croatia armed force was transported by the partisans toward Nevesinje. Those who did not reach the destination were killed and thrown into the Novakuša pit in Bišina near Nevesinje. The largest partisan killing site during the battles from Nevesinje in February 1945 and immediately after the war was the Novakuša pit near Bišina, located along the main road from Mostar to Nevesinje. According to the testimony of speleologist Srećko Božičević from 1980, the Novakuša pit was used as legal landfill. He claims that after the war, over 1,000 people were dumped into the pit, which was turned into a depot by the former district administration in Mostar. Another witness, Mate Šimundić, states that prisoners from Mostar's camp and prisons were thrown into the Bishna pit, and estimates that there could be at least 1,500 people. The last victims are said to have been killed there in 1948. Šimunić claimed that to conceal the crimes, the Yugoslavian authorities decided to cover the pit with trash brought from Nevesinje and partially from Mostar. A thick layer of garbage covering the victims was eventually burned. Regarding the issue of civilian victims in this investigation, the greatest challenge is the lack of available historiographical resources. So, according to research by journalist Nejad Dedović, based on several first-hand witnesses' testimonies, it is alleged that in Nevesinje in February 1945, between 150 and 200 Muslim residents, civilians, were killed by partisans. The judges who judged the defeated members of the armed force of the independent state of Croatia, Croatian prisoners, and the local population were Serbs and Muslims. The court summoned Serbs and Muslims for the defendants' native villages as witnesses. But their credibility was questionable. There are known places and houses where the witness gathered before testifying and coordinating their statements by OZNA. The relatives of the defendants often were not aware of the trial, so there was no opportunity for defense of credible witnesses. The defendants sentenced to the death by the military court of the 29th Herzegovinian Division, and they were killed in the city or at execution sites around Mostar. It is difficult to determine the exact number of Croats killed in stage court proceedings orchestrated by Communist Party of Yugoslavia. Conclusion. Serbs completely took control of Communist Party of Yugoslavia and won the Second World War in the final stages. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbs were rulers from 1945 to 1992. Regarding Muslims, they had a complex, a burden, because of relationship with and cooperation with Nazi Germany, also with Jerusalem Mufti Muhammad Amin al-Husseini, and also the cooperation with Croats. They were allies in the same independent state of Croatia. Muslim in communist Bosnia and Herzegovina were the first servants of Serbs and first servants of Communist Party of Yugoslavia, and distinguished themselves through killing and persecution of Croats, who found themselves in the new territorial unit in 1945, from independent states of Croatia in the new territorial unit Bosnia and Herzegovina. Croats suffered the most from communists in the post-war period, and this continued until 1966. So war after the war in Herzegovina lasted till 1966 with the political defeat of Aleksandar Ranković. Today, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the investigation of communist crimes is blocked by Bosniaks and Serbs for the reason mentioned above. The three constituent peoples in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosniaks, Croats and Serbs, have different visions from the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and therefore there is no political agreement among them. The war has continued throughout other means, and all processes in the country were controlled by international community. Thank you for your patience.